Police Scotland are tonight investigating claims that Rangers players used sectarian language while celebrating their victory in the Premiership. The force says officers are assessing the contents of a video circulating on social media. But the club says it is confident that no criminality has taken place, insisting that sectarianism has no place at Ibrox and casting doubt on the authenticity of the clip.
The Justice Secretary, Hamza Yousaf, has weighed in, saying if it is genuine, then Rangers should sack anyone found to be guilty of anti-Catholic hatred. It follows scenes of violent disorder in Glasgow city centre at the weekend, when celebrations by some fans ended in clashes with police. Rangers say those scenes besmirched the good name of the club. Our sports news correspondent, Chris McLaughlin, has the story.
Rangers players and staff inside Ibrox after lifting the title. The mobile phone footage appears to show them drinking alcohol and mixing together against COVID protocols. An investigation into that is underway. But it's another video also shot here on the same day, apparently in the same area, that's causing real controversy. In it, there's a group of Rangers players and backroom staff all singing the song Sweet Caroline. But many are alleging there's an extremely offensive anti-Catholic add-on relating to the Pope.
I'm disgusted by it. And let's not call it sectarian, it's anti-Catholic. And let me just say very, very clearly that if that video is genuine, then, well, first of all, I'm pleased that Police Scotland are investigating it and they will liaise with the Crown to see if any criminality has taken place. But let me also appeal to Rangers that they should also investigate if any players or staff have been found to take part in that anti-Catholic hatred, then they should be shown the door.
Rangers believe the footage has been doctored and is being used to discredit the club. In a statement they said, "It's deeply concerning that this video has been taken as genuine and has been shared widely, including by some political representatives who should be mindful of their influence and legal processes. Our squad is richly diverse, sectarianism is unacceptable and has no place in our club, which is underlined by our Everyone, Anyone campaign."
We'll review all the circumstances that are presented to us in that video and not just the specific allegations. And again, as I've said, if there are offences being committed, we can identify the individuals that are committing those offences, then we will take action.
It comes after some of the club's fans were widely condemned for gathering in numbers and then causing violence in Glasgow on Saturday. 28 people were arrested after clashes between fans and the police. A number of officers were injured and their federation is calling on the club to help provide a solution to prevent it happening again. After a weekend where the focus should have been on their title win, today Rangers are fighting to protect their reputation and may have more questions to answer. Chris McLaughlin, BBC News.
Well, Chris is here now. Chris, you touched on it at the end there. What kind of questions could Rangers be facing now?
Well, clearly the club don't think this footage is genuine. We've taken the decision not to show the footage. At this stage, they are just allegations. But if they are so confident this footage is not genuine, may they then be asked to provide some kind of evidence? Now, also the players, the backroom team involved in the video, might they at some point want to come out and give their side of the story to clarify exactly what might have been said? And what about the person who was behind the mobile phone? They must also have a story to tell. All questions for a potential police investigation. Now, also, given some of the conversations that I had earlier today, I know that the Scottish FA are also going to be looking at this. Now, the one thing that we can say for sure is that this has the potential, and at this stage just the potential, to be hugely damaging and hugely embarrassing to Rangers Football Club. This is a club, remember, that in the past has had to defend against allegations of an anti-Catholic agenda. It's a club that in recent weeks has had to take the front foot in defending one of its own players against racism. And also, as we heard in the report, they're a club that has been very keen to point towards this Everyone, Anyone campaign, which is very much against racism. Now, Rangers say the video is fake. They're also saying that politicians have jumped the gun here. In the end, it's up to the police to decide.
OK, it does sound like we're going to hear lots more in the story. Thanks very much for just now, Chris.
Well, we can discuss this a little bit more now with Jeanette Findlay, chair of the campaign group Call It Out. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. What is your take on what we've just seen there?
Scenes at the weekend. Well, I think my take is probably very much like everybody else. It was horrific, but it was entirely, I think, predictable. I think most people knew that that was going to happen. And I suppose the question that needs to be asked is twofold. One is, why did the police allow it to happen? Because it was quite obvious that it was going to happen. But the second question, I think, is more fundamental, which is what is it about Scottish society that allows a group of people to feel emboldened enough and enabled to regularly spout their anti-Catholic hatred and their anti-Irish racism on the streets of Scotland.
And what's your answer to that? Well, what do you think is the answer to that question?
Why do I think that they feel emboldened?
Yes.
Well, because this is not the first time this particular group of people have done this. It's not even the first time they've done it this year in the same place. And these are the same people, I would argue, who regularly parade the streets of Scotland, parading past Catholic churches and spouting their hatred. They are the same people who regularly graffiti, and that's been noticeably increased in recent times with slogans about kill all Taigs, Taigs will be shot, those kinds of things. That is a routine thing in Scotland. And for people to be all shocked and horrified, after the scenes at the weekend, well, they must have very short memories, and they certainly don't experience what our community experiences on a regular basis.
To what extent do you think that these anti-Catholic comments and chants and so on are just an example of a hard core of people who just will not accept modern Scotland? And to what extent do you think that they actually suggest continuing endemic prejudice against Catholics or Irish Catholics?
No, these are not... these are the most visible manifestations of the running sore, which is anti-Catholicism and anti-Irish racism in Scotland. These are the visible manifestations. They're not even the worst. We live in a country where Catholics are more likely to live in poor communities. Catholics are they're overrepresented in the prison population. They have died in larger numbers than any other ethnic minority group of COVID. And these are long-standing fundamental structural issues which Scottish society on the whole, not just Glasgow, not just the west of Scotland, it's not just a football thing, but they've failed to address these things.
But you don't accept do you, sorry to interrupt, but you don't accept then that there's been an emerging, successful, prosperous middle class of Catholics in Scotland, and that, for example, if you look at the research that one of our preeminent historian, arguably Professor Tom Devine, has done, talking about cracking any glass ceiling which in the past might have inhibited Catholics, 6 Scottish university principals in the past few years, 2 previous Lord Advocates, the most senior judge in Scotland. Isn't that evidence that actually there's nothing really holding Catholics or people of Irish descent back in this country?
Okay, well, if you argue that, and nobody is saying that we're in the same position we were when we arrived here in large numbers about 170 years ago. Nobody's suggesting that. And it is certainly true that some people become successful and have, through the education system, through our Catholic schools, become very successful. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But you still have to explain the numbers that I have just given you. You still have to explain why Catholics, who are only about 16% of the population, make up 42% of the victims of religious aggravated crime. You still have to explain that.
Well, just for the sake of argument, isn't it possible that one of the reasons for that is if you look at anti-sectarian crime, and you say that there are more Protestants than Catholics in the country, that even if both groups committed sectarian crime at an even level, then the statistics would show that there was more prejudice against Catholics.
Yeah,
logically.
and I know that Tom Devine has tried to argue that, and he's a very good historian, but maybe not so good a statistician. So
why is that wrong?
Well, it's wrong because if you take the proportion of people, crimes, it's crimes, not people. If you take the proportion of incidents in which the hatred that's being evinced is anti-Catholic, and then you look at the proportion of Catholics in society, then they're definitely overrepresented in terms of that crime. So, for instance, this is almost like the situation in the 1700s when Glasgow had more anti-Catholic societies than it had actual Catholic residents.
But it's not anything like the situation in the 1700s in any other respect, is it? I mean, is it?
No, I was making a statistical
analogy. No, I understand.
analogy.
I take your point. Is it your contention that sectarianism in Scotland only cuts one way now, and that, say, the singing of pro-IRA songs by some Celtic supporters, a small minority, is not something to be concerned about, that this is a one-way problem?
It's interesting that you should say that, because earlier on today your researcher was asking me why it is, and you have asked me why it is that this problem continues. Well, the problem continues because in the face of blatant, egregious anti-Catholic and anti-Irish racist behaviour at the weekend, you want to ask me about what members of my community might have done. That's why it still persists, because you want everybody to look away from the problem, which is there, it can be seen in the data, and you want to look away from that and start to talk about what about
Okay.
I'm afraid that's the problem.
That's palpably not the case, as was evidenced by the fact we've spent 5 minutes discussing one, and I've asked you another on the wider issue of sectarianism. But thank you very much indeed for your time. Jeanette Findlay from the Call It Out campaign. Appreciate your joining us this evening. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
You're watching